I've never been the type to let paranoia consume me. At least that was true until recently. Samantha and I had shared 5 years together, married for 3, and life seemed ordinary. Comfortable even, or so I believed. She worked in marketing while I was getting by as a financial consultant. We weren't swimming in money, but everything was steady. Nice dinners now and then, the occasional vacation, and those lazy Sundays spent binge-watching shows. Nothing out of the ordinary, just the routine of life. However, everything started to shift a few months back. It began subtly, the kind of changes you notice but choose to ignore because, let's be honest, nobody wants to be that guy. She began staying late at work more frequently, insisting that her team needed her to push through their tasks. That seemed reasonable enough. Work happens, right? But the way she acted when she returned home began to put me on edge. The Samantha I knew would usually collapse onto the couch, exhausted, and vent about her day. Now, she barely uttered a word. Just a quick, hey, a kiss that felt obligatory, and then she'd retreat to her phone or the shower, as if escaping from me. Her attitude toward her phone also became strange. Sure, everyone keeps their phones close these days, but Samantha? She started treating hers like it held classified information. Previously, she'd leave it lying around carelessly, but now it was always face down or buried in her bag. If it buzzed while I was around, she'd snatch it up before I could catch a glimpse. And don't even get me started on her excuses. Whenever I asked about it, she'd become defensive, acting like I was intruding on her privacy. One night, I suggested we go out for dinner, just the two of us. It's been ages since we had some quality time together, I said, hoping to convey how much I missed her. But she shot me down before I could finish my thought. I can't, babe. There's an urgent meeting tonight, she replied, casually tying her hair up in that way that used to drive me crazy. Derek is dragging things out again. You know how he is. She laughed lightly, but it felt forced, like she was putting on a show. Then she kissed me on the cheek, grabbed her purse, and dashed out the door before I could get another word in. I stood there, watching her go, wondering just who this Derek was. She'd mentioned him before. Some guy from her team, supposedly harmless. But the way she said his name this time made my skin crawl. But I didn't want to jump to conclusions. It wasn't like I had any solid evidence. So I brushed it off. Then, just a few days later, Megan, the neighbor from across the hall, knocked on my door. She's one of those nosy types who always seems to have her finger on the pulse of everyone's business, even when no one asks her to. Hey, Lucas, do you have a moment? She asked, sporting that familiar inquisitive grin. Sure, I replied, leaning against the doorframe. Megan isn't one to hold back, so I braced myself for whatever gossip she was about to deliver. I was out with some friends last night and, I think I saw Samantha, she said, lowering her voice into that conspiratorial tone she uses when she's about to drop some juicy news. She was at that new Italian place downtown. You know, La Sorella? My brow furrowed. Samantha said she was working late. Megan shot me a look that screamed disbelief. Well, she wasn't alone. She was with some guy. Tall, dark hair, kind of handsome. They seemed close. And just like that, I felt the first real pang of doubt. Nothing concrete, just a little nudge that burrowed into my mind. I tried to shrug it off, but it gnawed at me throughout the day. That night, I observed her more intently. I noticed how she avoided eye contact when I asked about her day. Same old stuff, she muttered, scrolling through her phone as if I wasn't even there. I wanted to confront her, but what could I say? That Megan thought she saw her with another guy? It just didn't feel substantial enough. I needed evidence, and evidence arrived sooner than I anticipated. One evening, Samantha left her phone on the kitchen counter while she went upstairs for a shower. Normally, I'd never think to touch it, but that night, something inside me snapped. Perhaps it was the unsettling tone in her voice when she mentioned Derek. Maybe it was Megan's little tidbit, or perhaps I was just fed up with being in the dark. I picked up her phone, my heart racing so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I wasn't sure what I was searching for, just anything that might explain why everything felt so off. And then I found it, a text from Derek, sitting right at the top of her notifications. You looked amazing. Can't wait for Friday. It hit me like a punch to the gut. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, desperately hoping I was misreading it, wishing there was some innocent explanation. But deep down, I knew. I shouldn't have, but I opened her photo gallery. And there they were, pictures of her and Derek at some work event. They weren't just casual snaps. They were intimate, arms wrapped around each other, grinning in a way that made my stomach churn. She was wearing that red dress I adored, the one she hadn't worn for me in ages. The worst part? It was an event I wasn't even invited to. She told me it was just for the team, not a big deal and certainly not something I'd enjoy. Yet there she was, clinging to Derek as if he was her entire world. I locked the phone and set it back on the counter just as I heard the water shut off upstairs. My mind was racing, a cocktail of anger, hurt, and disbelief swirling together in a toxic blend. I wanted to scream, to confront her right then and there, but I didn't. Not yet. I needed time to process. When she came back downstairs, wrapped in a towel, she flashed me a quick smile. "What do you want to do for dinner?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and all I could see was the woman from those photos, the woman who had lied straight to my face, who had betrayed me without a second thought. "Not hungry," I muttered, brushing past her to the living room. She didn't even bother to ask what was wrong. That was when it all became clear to me. The Samantha I had married, the one with whom I had shared my life, was gone. In her place was a stranger, someone who could meet my gaze and lie without hesitation. But confronting her right then wasn't in the cards. Not until I figured out how to navigate this mess. One thing was absolutely certain: I couldn't just let this slide. When those pictures flashed across my screen, it felt like everything inside me crumbled. My heart wasn't just fractured. It felt utterly destroyed, as if someone had taken a wrecking ball to my reality. I stumbled into the bathroom, locked the door behind me, and sank onto the cold tile floor. My hands trembled as if they had a mind of their own, and I struggled to catch my breath, my chest tightening painfully. This wasn't just about her betrayal. It was about the effortless way she lied. Coming home from him, from Derek, acting as if everything were normal, like she hadn't just dismantled our marriage for a fleeting fling with a guy she insisted was just a friend. I pounded my fist against the floor, the pain snapping me back to the present. My gaze fixated on the wall, thoughts spiraling. The most painful part wasn't even the photos. It was how cold she had become. For months, every time I reached out, trying to connect, she drifted further away. I sensed the gap widening, but I kept convincing myself it was just a rough patch, that work stress was the culprit and that we would get through it. Now I understood the brutal truth. She wasn't merely distancing herself. She was sprinting into Derek's embrace, and I had been too blind to see it. I could hear her moving around outside the bathroom, likely preparing for bed as if it were any other night. My blood boiled at the thought. How could she look me in the eye, crawl into our bed, and act as if everything was fine? I clenched my jaw so tightly it throbbed. She had no clue I was onto her. Not yet, and that gave me a slight edge for the time being. The next day, I called my old friend Ethan. We had known each other since we were kids, one of the few people I could trust without question. I texted him to see if he was free for drinks, and within an hour we were huddled in a dim dive bar downtown. Ethan gave me a long, appraising look as I slammed down my second shot.
All recht, Mann.
What's going on? I laid it all out without sugarcoating anything. The late nights, the strange phone habits, the incriminating pictures, the text from Derek. As I recounted everything, I felt my rage boiling beneath the surface. It was a struggle to voice my feelings. Saying it all out loud made it far too real. When I finished, Ethan leaned back, shaking his head in disbelief.
Shit, Mann.
That's rough. I don't even know what to say. I chuckled, but it came out bitter. Yeah, welcome to the club. You've got to leave her, Lucas, he urged, his tone serious. She's not worth your time. If she's doing this now, she'll just do it again. Cut your losses, file for divorce, and get the hell out. Ethan was right, he should have been, but walking away felt like surrendering. It wasn't enough to simply leave. I wanted her to feel the same anguish she had inflicted on me. No, I replied firmly, shaking my head. I'm not giving up on this. Not yet. Ethan raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. What's brewing in that head of yours? I'm going to make her experience the same humiliation she dished out to me. I muttered, more to myself than him. He eyed me warily. What do you mean by that, Lucas? I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. Jasmine McLean. Ethan's eyes widened, and he burst into laughter. Jasmine? Seriously? Dude, Samantha can't stand her. Exactly. Jasmine had always been a contentious topic between Samantha and me. She'd been Samantha's best friend for years, but there had always been an undeniable spark between Jasmine and me. It was never anything I acted on, but Samantha could sense it. Jasmine had this flirty charm that drove Samantha crazy. We'd fought about her more times than I could count, even though nothing ever happened between us. But now, I was going to turn that tension into something real, and it would drive Samantha absolutely mad. You know Jasmine's always had a soft spot for you, Ethan said, shaking his head, grinning. This is going to get messy. That's exactly the point, I replied, my voice low and dangerous. She deserves messy. Ethan looked skeptical but didn't push back. Just be cautious, man. This kind of stuff, it rarely ends well. Later that night, after getting home from the bar, I lay in bed next to Samantha, staring at the ceiling while she slept soundly beside me. I felt like a ghost in my own life. A part of me wanted to wake her up, throw those pictures in her face, and demand she explain herself. But deep down, I knew there were no words that could make this right. Nothing she could say would change what I now knew. So I began plotting. I knew precisely how to proceed. Jasmine had always made her interest clear. It wasn't overt, just subtle hints, lingering touches, and that mischievous smirk she flashed when Samantha wasn't paying attention. Samantha loathed it, and I had always brushed Jasmine off out of respect for my marriage. But now I was done being the good guy. I pulled out my phone and opened Jasmine's contact. For a split second, I hesitated. This wasn't me. I wasn't the kind of guy who used people for revenge. But Samantha had turned me into someone I didn't recognize. If this was who I needed to become to make her feel the same way I did, then so be it. I typed out a message. Hey, it's been a while. We should catch up sometime. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the send button. Then, without giving myself a chance to overthink it, I pressed send. The message delivered in an instant. I was confident Jasmine would respond. She always did. And when she did, Samantha would regret ever crossing me. True to form, Jasmine replied within the hour. She was always quick to respond, especially when it came to me. Hey, stranger. Long time no see. Let's grab coffee sometime. A smirk crept across my face as I read her message. This was too easy. Jasmine had always shown a little too much interest, always ready with a playful smile or a lingering gaze. Samantha had picked up on it early and despised her for it, but I had always brushed it aside. Now I was diving headfirst into precisely what Samantha had dreaded from the beginning. We met at a charming little coffee shop downtown, the type with exposed brick walls and lattes that cost more than they should. I spotted Jasmine before she even noticed me. Long blonde hair, form-fitting jeans, a low-cut blouse. Subtlety was not her strong suit. Lucas, she called, her face lighting up as I approached. She enveloped me in a hug that lingered just a moment too long, her sweet perfume mingling with a hint of musk. Jasmine, I said, smiling genuinely. You look incredible. She laughed, tucking her hair behind her ear. Oh, stop it. You haven't changed a bit. The conversation flowed effortlessly. I kept things light, steering it toward old memories and shared jokes. Jasmine leaned in closer than necessary, her hand brushing against mine at every opportunity. I didn't pull away. In fact, I began to return the flirtation, complimenting her laugh, her smile, and the spark she still possessed. She drank it all in, hanging on my every word. We lingered for over an hour, and by the time we parted, the spark I had ignited felt more like a raging fire. Jasmine gave me one last hug, her lips grazing my cheek as she whispered, "We should do this again soon." As I made my way back to my car, I knew she was hooked. The game was officially on. A few days later, I shot her a text. "How about dinner? My treat. I know a place you'll love." She agreed without a moment's hesitation. And that's when I realized I had her right where I wanted her. Samantha's best friend was practically begging for my attention, and I was more than willing to oblige, at least for the time being. We met at an upscale restaurant, the kind with dim lighting and a wine list that could double as a novel. Jasmine arrived fashionably late, wearing a fitted black dress that hugged her every curve. "You clean up nicely," I said, standing to greet her. She grinned. "You're looking pretty good yourself." Dinner felt like a slow, seductive dance. Jasmine's flirtation was no longer playful. It was more calculated. She leaned in close when she spoke, her hand brushing against mine as she reached for her wineglass. I mirrored her every move, locking eyes and smiling at the perfect moments. It was all about building tension, letting the anticipation simmer. Halfway through the meal, Jasmine leaned across the table, her voice dropping to a soft, intimate whisper. "You know, Lucas, I've always had a thing for you." I feigned surprise. "Really? I had no idea." "Oh, come on," she teased, her eyes twinkling. "You must have known. Samantha never appreciated you the way she should have. I always thought she took you for granted." I sipped my wine slowly, letting her words hang in the air. "You might be onto something there." Jasmine smiled, her hand sliding over mine. "I mean it, Lucas. You're amazing. Any woman would be lucky to have you." I chuckled softly, shaking my head. "If only you'd told me that sooner." I noticed the flicker of hope in her eyes, the kind that inspires people to act recklessly. Meanwhile, back at home, Samantha was starting to sense the change. I could tell by the way she scrutinized me, probing for details, trying to pry into my day. "You seem different lately," she said one night, her tone cautious. "Is everything all right?" "Yeah, everything's fine," I replied, keeping my tone light. "Why wouldn't it be?" She frowned, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I don't know. You just seem distant." I shrugged casually. "Maybe I've just been tired." It was a flimsy excuse, but it was enough to divert her attention, for now. I wasn't ready for a confrontation. Not yet. I needed to keep things under wraps until my plan was fully in motion. The more I pulled away, the more her suspicions grew. I could see it in the way she observed me, her questions becoming increasingly pointed. "Where were you tonight?" she asked one evening as I came home later than usual. "Out with Ethan," I replied smoothly. "You know how he gets. One beer turns into 5. She didn't seem convinced, but there wasn't much she could say. After all, she was the one sneaking around with Derek. If she wanted to accuse me of anything, she'd have to confront her own guilt first. I made sure to keep things just vague enough to drive her crazy. I didn't give her anything concrete to latch onto, just enough to keep her wondering. It was a delicate dance, but I was getting the hang of it. The goal was to make her feel precisely what I had felt. Confused, paranoid, and constantly questioning everything. Every time I noticed her glance at her phone or furrow her brow at my vague responses, a dark sense of satisfaction coursed through me. It wasn't enough to settle the score just yet, but it was a start. As for Jasmine, she was all in. Our dinner had gone flawlessly, and by the end of the night, she made it abundantly clear she was ready for more. She kissed me on the cheek as we said goodnight, her lips lingering just a moment too long. "Call me," she breathed, her warm breath brushing against my skin. I smiled, feeling a rush of confidence. "Count on it." As I drove home that night, a dark sense of triumph coursed through me. Samantha had no idea what was looming on the horizon, and Jasmine was getting more entangled in the trap with each passing day. The stage was perfectly set. All I had to do was play my part and wait for the right moment to watch it all come crashing down. Our wedding anniversary arrived faster than I could have imagined. It was meant to be a celebration of love, right? 5 years together, 3 of them married, and yet here I was, orchestrating an elaborate scheme of betrayal and humiliation. The irony wasn't lost on me. Samantha had no clue what was coming her way. She'd made her choice with Derek, and tonight, she was going to witness just how far she had strayed from our vows. I went all out for the occasion. I rented a stunning countryside villa, an expansive estate adorned with ivy-covered walls, elegant chandeliers, and a garden that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. We invited everyone. Friends, colleagues, neighbors, and yes, even Derek. I made certain he got an invite. This wasn't just about hurting Samantha. It was about ensuring she had an audience for her humiliation. On the morning of the event, Samantha radiated excitement. It was the most animated I had seen her in months, which only served to infuriate me further. Her enthusiasm wasn't for me. It was for the performance we were about to put on for others. She floated around the house, humming happily as she prepared, blissfully unaware that I shared her excitement, for entirely different reasons. By the time evening rolled around, the villa was bustling with guests. I greeted everyone with a friendly smile, playing the part of the devoted husband. Samantha looked stunning in her dress, the same damn red one she had worn for Derek. I couldn't decide if she wore it out of guilt or to flaunt her power, but either way it only fueled my determination. Throughout the night, I stayed close to her, my hand resting on the small of her back, whispering sweet nothings in her ear. She beamed at our friends, soaking up every compliment about how lucky we were and how strong our relationship appeared. I nodded along, suppressing every bitter retort that threatened to spill out. If only they knew the truth. Jasmine was also in attendance, looking both stunning and dangerously alluring in a sleek black dress. I caught her eye from across the room. She smirked knowingly at me, and I gave her a subtle nod. She was well aware of her role in my plan and how to execute it flawlessly. Derek, however, strolled in late, exactly as I had anticipated. I was engaged in conversation with some of Samantha's coworkers when I noticed her freeze for a brief moment, her eyes darting toward the entrance. There he was, swaggering in with that insufferable grin I had come to loathe. The transformation in Samantha was immediate. Her whole demeanor shifted. She smiled, a genuine radiant smile, in a way I hadn't witnessed in months. It was as if someone had flipped a switch, awakening her from a long slumber. That moment confirmed everything I had suspected. I had wondered if I was being paranoid, but the way she lit up at his arrival left no doubt. I clenched my jaw but forced myself to remain composed. No outbursts, no confrontations, not yet. There was a script to follow, and I was committed to it. I made a point to warmly greet Derek, clapping him on the shoulder and handing him a drink. Samantha watched us with a tight, anxious smile. She had no idea how much I truly understood. As the night wore on and the crowd began to thin, I excused myself from the party. Samantha noticed, of course. I could feel her gaze following me as I slipped away and ascended the grand staircase to the second floor. That would be her signal. Soon enough, she would come looking for me. But by then, it would be too late. Jasmine was already waiting for me in the room, leaning casually against the bedpost with a confident grin. "You sure you want to go through with this?" she asked, although we both knew she wouldn't stop me. "More than ready," I replied, shutting the door firmly behind me. She needed no further persuasion. Within moments, we were entwined in the sheets, her hands exploring every inch of me, her breath warm and intoxicating against my neck. It was raw and chaotic, a stark contrast to my experiences with Samantha. But this was about more than just physical pleasure. It was about executing the plan, the moment of reckoning that was on the horizon. And right on cue, the door swung open. Samantha stood there, frozen in disbelief, her expression shifting from shock to horror. Her mouth moved, but no words emerged. Jasmine, completely unfazed, sat up slowly, wrapping the sheet around herself like a trophy. "Well," Jasmine quipped with a smirk, "looks like you've finally learned what betrayal feels like." I focused on Samantha, waiting for the storm to erupt. But instead of rage, she simply stood there, her complexion paling, knuckles white as she clutched the doorknob. I could see her mind racing, the realization dawning that not only had I caught her in the act, but I had taken it one step further, humiliating her in front of the one person she despised most. "You," she finally whispered, her voice trembling. "You son of a bitch." I sat up calmly, offering her the same smile she had given me countless times when she thought I was oblivious. "Now we're even, Samantha." She stared at me, her chest rising and falling with the weight of rage and betrayal. And for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of peace. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when she would truly understand what it felt like to have everything she loved ripped away. Downstairs, I could hear the party continuing, blissfully unaware of the chaos unfolding above. But I knew it wouldn't stay quiet for long. Samantha would rush back down, and soon enough everyone would know. Whispers would spread, and the shame would set in, just like it had for me when I discovered those photos. Samantha took a step back from the doorway, her eyes locked on mine. "You're disgusting," she spat, venom dripping from her words. I shrugged, completely unfazed. "Takes one to know one." And with that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Jasmine let out a soft chuckle beside me, lighting a cigarette as if everything that just happened was perfectly normal. "That was a blast," she said, blowing a cloud of smoke toward the ceiling. I didn't reply. Instead, I reclined back on the bed, staring blankly at the ceiling, listening to the distant sounds of laughter and music drifting up from downstairs. The plan had executed flawlessly. I had finally gotten my revenge. Yet as I lay there, the sense of victory felt strangely empty. The exhilaration I expected didn't come. Instead, all I felt was a void where my anger had been. I had won this battle, sure, but what had I truly gained? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Samantha had stood frozen in the doorway, eyes wide and lips parted, struggling to grasp the situation unfolding before her. I could see disbelief wash over her face. The shock, the betrayal, the horrifying realization that her web of lies had unraveled. She wanted to scream, to cry, but no sound came forth. Her gaze flickered between me and Jasmine, desperately trying to piece together the nightmare in front of her. Jasmine, unbothered and exuding confidence, slid off the bed with casual grace. She moved deliberately, savoring every moment of Samantha's anguish, draping a silk robe over herself as if it were a prize. "Well," Jasmine remarked coolly, her voice dripping with satisfaction, "now you know what it feels like to have trust shattered." Samantha's expression twisted, and for a moment, I feared she might collapse right there. But she didn't. Instead, she shot Jasmine a look filled with venomous rage. You're revolting," she whispered, her voice shaking. Jasmine just laughed, a sharp, mocking sound that cut through the tension. "Oh, don't pretend you're shocked, Samantha. We both know you had this coming." Samantha's fingers clenched the doorframe until her knuckles turned white. For a moment, I thought she might lunge at Jasmine, but instead, she turned on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door with enough force to echo through the house. The sound reverberated, marking the beginning of her downfall. Jasmine perched herself on the edge of the bed, lighting another cigarette, that same smug grin still plastered across her face. Well, that went even better than I hoped. I remained silent, lying back against the pillows, my mind oddly blank. The satisfaction I had imagined was nowhere to be found. I had fantasized about this moment for weeks, the perfect act of revenge, the sweet taste of retribution. But now, all I felt was an unsettling emptiness. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. I could hear the murmur of voices rising from downstairs, hushed conversations gradually escalating into urgent whispers. The first ripple had begun. Someone must have spotted Samantha fleeing from the room, her face pale and her eyes wild. In a crowd like this, secrets rarely stayed concealed for long. Jasmine leaned in, her smirk widening. "You know it won't be long before everyone knows the whole story, right?" I nodded, aware that was part of the plan. Samantha wasn't just going to lose me. She was about to lose everything: her friends, her dignity, her meticulously crafted social standing. By the time we descended the staircase, the whispers had crescendoed into a chaotic buzz. People glanced our way, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed amusement. It wasn't long before the truth spread like wildfire. Samantha's affair with Derek, my revenge with Jasmine. It was all out in the open now, and there would be no putting the pieces back together. Jasmine, ever the attention seeker, wasted no time making her move. As soon as Samantha re-emerged, still disheveled and red-eyed, Jasmine stepped forward with a saccharine smile. "Samantha?" she chirped sweetly, though the malice in her tone was unmistakable. "I think it's time we clear the air. Don't you think?" Samantha shot her a furious glare, jaw clenched. "You're not doing this here." "Oh, but I absolutely am." Jasmine's smile broadened. "You betrayed me. You betrayed Lucas. Hell, you betrayed yourself. Everyone here deserves to see who you truly are." The crowd fell silent, hanging on every word. Samantha looked as if she wished to disappear, but Jasmine pressed on, her words sharp and unyielding. "Let's be real, Samantha. You threw away your marriage for some loser who couldn't even show up on time." Jasmine tilted her head mockingly. "What was your plan? Keep sneaking around with Derek until Lucas caught on? Or did you honestly believe you could get away with it forever?" Samantha's gaze darted around the room, searching for support, for someone, anyone, to take her side. But the faces staring back were cold and judgmental. No one stood with her now. She was utterly isolated. Jasmine turned to the crowd, addressing them as if delivering a final blow. "I'm done being friends with a backstabbing snake. So, Samantha, consider our friendship over." Samantha's expression crumpled, and she opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. Jasmine didn't wait for a reply. With a final triumphant smirk, she walked away, leaving Samantha standing in the center of the room, utterly exposed and humiliated. Just like that, the social circle Samantha had spent years cultivating began to disintegrate. It was as if I were watching a tower of cards collapse, piece by piece. People whispered behind her back, their smiles tight and insincere. Friends she had thought she could rely on began to distance themselves, not wanting to get caught in the fallout. As for Derek, he slipped away the moment things turned messy. I knew he would bail, and he didn't disappoint. By the time Samantha's world started to crumble, he was already trying to salvage his own reputation, retreating like a coward. Whispers spread like wildfire at her workplace, too. Samantha had always been the shining star, the one everyone admired. But now she was just the woman who had sabotaged her marriage for a fling with a coworker. The gossip followed her into meetings and every conversation she had at the office. Her once sterling professional reputation lay in ruins, tarnished beyond repair. Samantha initially fought back, trying to explain, to justify her actions. But no one wanted to hear her out. Derek kept his distance, unwilling to intervene. And without his backing, Samantha was left to navigate the fallout on her own. I observed everything unfold with an unsettling sense of detachment. I thought watching her life unravel would feel satisfying, and for a brief time, it did. There was a grim pleasure in witnessing her lose everything, knowing she was finally facing the consequences of her choices. However, as the days slipped by, that satisfaction began to fade. The anger that had propelled me, the fury that had fueled my actions, started to diminish, leaving behind a hollow ache. I had secured my victory, but at what cost? Samantha was a shell of her former self, alone, shunned, and abandoned by the very people she once counted on. And me? I was no better off. Yes, I had dismantled her life, but in doing so, I felt as if I had lost a piece of myself. In the immediate aftermath, the sight of Samantha's world collapsing gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. It felt like a form of justice, the kind I had envisioned countless times. I watched her stumble through the wreckage of her life like a lost soul. No more late-night meetings. No more secretive texts. Friends are friends. Avoided her as if she were tainted. At work, the respect she once commanded vanished, replaced by whispers and sidelong glances. And Derek? He had ghosted her completely, leaving her to deal with the aftermath on her own. I had achieved what I set out to do. I had watched it all burn down, just as I had envisioned. In the first few days, I felt a surge of triumph. Every time I saw her wandering through the house, eyes vacant, spirit crushed, I reassured myself that she deserved this fate. When I heard her sobbing quietly in the bathroom at night, I reminded myself of the photos, the texts from Derek, the countless lies she had spun with a smile. I didn't comfort her. I felt no sympathy. I felt justified. But as time dragged on, that sense of victory began to erode, replaced by something darker. At first, I couldn't identify it, but it gnawed at me like a dull ache. I found myself sitting in the hushed silence of the house, reflecting on what we once shared, back when everything seemed good, or at least when I believed it was. It played out in my mind like an old movie. Lazy mornings in bed, her laughter echoing in the air. Those early dates filled with excitement and possibility. The way she used to look at me, like I was her everything, kept resurfacing. No matter how hard I tried to push those memories away, they returned, unwelcome yet persistent. One evening, Ethan called. He had been my biggest supporter throughout this ordeal, constantly reminding me that Samantha was reaping what she had sown. "Let's hit the bar," he suggested. "One last night to celebrate your freedom. You've earned it." I agreed, hoping the noise and drinks would drown out the emptiness creeping in. The bar was alive with laughter and chatter, a cacophony of voices blending with the music. Ethan slapped me on the back, ordering shots as if we were toasting a new job rather than the end of my marriage. "To freedom!" he shouted, raising his glass. "To finally being rid of that lying bitch." I forced a smile and clinked glasses with him, downing the shot. The burn of the liquor was sharp, but it didn't provide the relief I was searching for. The victory felt hollow. The celebration seemed meaningless. Ethan rambled on, but his words faded into the background. I sat there nursing my drink, feeling increasingly detached. Eventually, Ethan leaned in, grinning. "What's wrong? You should be on top of the world right now." I shrugged, swirling the whiskey in my glass. "I don't know, Ethan. It just doesn't feel like I thought it would." Ethan frowned, puzzled. "You won, Lucas. You got your revenge. You're free now." Free. The word felt foreign and hollow. Sure, Samantha was out of my life, her betrayal laid bare, her reputation in tatters. But instead of liberation, I felt lost. Somewhere along the way, amidst all the anger and plotting, I had lost more than just her. I had lost myself. After another drink, I excused myself and left Ethan at the bar. I drove home through the quiet, dark streets, feeling like a stranger in my own life. The house felt eerily silent when I stepped inside. Too quiet. I kicked off my shoes, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and sank into the living room, surrounded by the memories of our life together. I found myself scrolling through old photos, vacations, birthdays, spontaneous nights out. There was one of us from our first anniversary, sitting on a beach, smiling like we were the only two people in the world. I remembered the happiness that day brought, convinced that she was my forever. I had believed in us, in love, and in the future we were meant to build together. Now, I wasn't sure I believed in any of it. I stared at the photos, feeling the weight of everything I had lost. Not just Samantha, but the version of myself that existed before all of this. The man who had faith in love, who thought trust was unshakable, who wanted nothing more than to make his wife happy. That man was gone, replaced by someone unrecognizable. Someone bitter, hollow, and exhausted. The silence of the house wrapped around me like a shroud, heavy and suffocating. I took a long sip of my beer and leaned back on the couch, allowing the memories to wash over me. Revenge was supposed to bring me peace. That was the lie I had told myself. If I could make her experience the pain I felt, betrayal, humiliation, then everything would be all right. But the truth was, revenge hadn't mended anything. It had merely traded one kind of pain for another, deeper wound. Samantha was gone, her life in ruins. But instead of feeling triumphant, I felt vacant. I sat there for what felt like hours, lost in the flickering glow of the TV I had left on mute. The beer grew warm in my hand, and the photos on my phone blurred as I scrolled mindlessly through them. I realized then that there would be no closure, no neat resolution to this tale. Just a shattered marriage, broken trust, and the harsh reality that some wounds don't heal. They linger, like scars. I had won, but the victory felt meaningless. Peace seemed forever out of reach, and the man I once was, the one who believed in love, was gone for good. All that remained was the empty house, the silent echoes of memories, and me, sitting alone amid the ruins of a life I once thought I understood. And for the first time since all of this began, I grasped the true cost of revenge. I hadn't merely lost Samantha. I had lost myself.